Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar from Spinnaker Support, in which we will discuss how you can maximize the value you obtain from your SAP landscape and understand the support options available to you. During today's session, we'll cover a number of topics designed to give you a full understanding of third-party support, how it can benefit you as an SAP customer, and what the journey could look like if you were to transition across from your current support with SAP to a Spinnaker Support third-party solution. As a way of introduction, to help me on the call today, I'm pleased to say I'm joined by Gavin Silkstone, who is the Director of the SAP delivery teams in Spinnaker for the EMEA and Asia Pacific regions. I'm also delighted to say that we're joined today by Alan from Findel, who is going to share his experience of Spinnaker Support with us, having been a customer of ours for nearly 6 years now. So let's get going. First and foremost, what is third-party support? So third-party support at its core element is software support for applications and databases that replaces the support provided today by the vendor. So for the purposes of today's webinar, we're talking about the support that's provided by SAP under their enterprise support, standard support, or PSLE support offerings. So why do we see companies switch to Spinnaker support and to third-party support? It's important to contextualize this and understand when third-party support as an offering really first came to market in circa 2008, 2009, third-party support was very much a commercial option. The reason that a lot of customers looked to switch was really around the cost savings that were obtainable. At that time, there's a lot of companies going through some significant financial stress, and the cost savings that were able to be delivered via third-party support were the primary driver for those customers to migrate across from vendor support to third-party support. However, if we look back in the last kind of 3, 4, maybe 5 years, we've seen a significant shift in the reasons why a lot of our customers are coming across to our support offering. And they're coming really into two predominant categories, all based around freedom and liberation. So the first category really is that architectural freedom, architectural liberation. So what do I mean by that? We're looking at customers who are saying, from an architectural perspective, I don't want to be forced to upgrade to a system in order to remain compliant or to remain supported. I don't want to be forced to move to the latest product in order to fix an issue. I just want the issue to be fixed. If I do want to move, I want to move on my own time frame. If I've got a sustainable, solid platform that is working today and is not causing me any problems, I don't want to be forced to migrate that. I want the freedom and the liberation to control my roadmap the way I want to control it, not the way a vendor wants to control it. The second element is mentioned architectural freedom, is really around the commercial freedom. So the flexibility to have a break from the vendor relationship, the lock-in that's quite often inherent in the legacy on-prem support-driven contracts. So the flexibility to contract based upon what you're actually using, to remove elements of shelfware, to be able to pay for support that you're actually consuming, as opposed to paying a large support cost with significant margin that's going to be delivered straight into an R&D program or into launching new cloud products that you might never ever as a customer take advantage of. So the big shift in the last couple of years has definitely been around how can our customers liberate their architecture, liberate themselves commercially, and the answer to that is moving to third-party support can deliver all of those things. Yes, the freedom to determine your IT roadmap, the cost savings are absolutely still there. There's still between 50, 60, sometimes 70% cost savings for customers who move from vendor support, but they're often the icing on the cake as opposed to the underlying real reason why a customer looks to move. So let's now look at this specific to SAP. So as I'm sure everyone on the call today is aware, SAP have announced, not so recently now, but they've announced that the support for ECC6 is going to officially end in the end of 2027. There will be support available until the end of 2030, but that's going to be at a premium cost, and it's also going to have potentially potential changes to the deliverables within that support. So we're looking at a support date of end of 2027. This is really driven initially by SAP's desire to get their customer base to move to S4. Now, as SAP customers, I'm sure you've all had this conversation with your SAP account exec numerous times. The move to S4, the drive to S4HANA. Now, that seems to be replaced with the drive to RISE, the S4 cloud offering from SAP. So the customers who are speaking to SAP and asking what the roadmap is and asking what their options are really limited. SAP will only be talking to you about RISE. It might be public cloud, it might be private cloud, but it's S4 in the cloud, RISE. So what if I cannot see the value in moving to S4? What if there is no significant value to my business that I can drive by moving to S4? What if the functionality in RISE is not there? What if the functionality doesn't deliver what I need for my business? What if I've got a whole host of customizations and I can't take those customizations with me? And I've got to go back to a standard approach with a cloud-based solution. What if all these scenarios mean that RISE doesn't work for you? Are you being forced into making a choice that doesn't work for your business because there is a risk that you're not going to be supported after 2027? Well, actually, the real reason for the conversation today, and one of the key messages we want to bring out today, is you do have options. In reality, there are a number of choices, all of these enabled by third-party support. So what can you do? Clearly, you can, under third-party support, remain on ECC 6 or ECC 5 or R3, whichever one you want to remain on for as long as you want. There is no concept of an end of support life with third-party support from Spinnaker. So you can stay on your stable platform that's delivering for your business as long as you want. You could, for example, move to S4 and then still remain on-premise. It's not a popular option anymore with SAP because they want to sell you cloud, but very much the option is there for those customers who are looking at S4 perhaps down the line. Absolutely, you can move to S4 and remain supported by a third-party support provider. You could look to convert your contracts today. You could convert your ECC 6 contract to an S4 contract, use the ability to retrospectively use ECC out until I think it's 2040 is the common date that you can use ECC to, supported by third-party support and enabling you to migrate or upgrade to S4 at any point in that journey. Or you could do all of the above and you could re-platform onto a hyperscaler platform. So if you wanted that element of cloud functionality, but you wanted to keep the reduced cost of a full-blown ERP migration, or you wanted to keep the customizations that you have in place. So you have a number of options, again, enabled by third-party support. So what could an example look like there? So let's say, and these are customers that we've spoken to in the last couple of months and customers that we're working with today. You've made the decision that you want to stay on ECC, but you've maybe converted your contract, so you have an S4 contract, but you want to stay on ECC for the foreseeable future. Under third-party support, you decide that you're going to stay on ECC until 2032. You can then look at all the tools that are available in the marketplace to enhance and optimize your ECC system, to customize it to work for your business. And then at that point in time in 2032, you've made some significant savings because of the lack of upgrades that you've needed to do, because of the cost savings and the OPEX reduction from moving to third-party support. But you're at a point there where you can say, actually, do I want to take my ECC 6 platform and move it to RISE or whatever is there at the time? RISE will be an 18-year-old system at that time. S4 will be an 18-year-old technology. Do I want to migrate a 35, 40-year-old platform onto an 18-year-old technology? Or do I want to look at that point in time about what is the best of breed, what is in the market that's going to deliver for my business needs at that point in time? Again, it's a very real option to you, available, enabled by moving to Spinnaker support for your SAP support options. So you as a customer have ability. You have the ability to decide when you want to move, if you want to move, and you can control the narrative of the way through that move. So the most commonly asked question I get when I'm speaking to customers is, this sounds great. It sounds fantastic. I can save my OPEX costs. I can be in control of my roadmap, and I can sweat my asset a little bit further, and I don't have the risk of a significant costly ERP migration. That sounds fantastic. But the most common objection I get is, what are SAP going to say? SAP are going to tell me all the reasons why I can't do this. So let's address some of those head on today. So the most common one that we'll hear from an SAP customer is SAP saying, you're no longer on the SAP journey. If you make this decision, you're out of the SAP journey. Yeah, there is a perception that you will be no longer on the SAP journey. But the fact that you're considering moving to third-party support probably means that the SAP journey isn't right for you at this point in time. That does not mean that you can't go back onto an SAP journey in 2 years, in 3 years, in 6 years, in 7 years. There is absolutely no reason you can't go back to SAP at some point in the future. The analogy I like to use is if I've bought a car from BMW and I haven't got that car serviced at BMW. If I go back to them in 3 years' time and say I want to buy another BMW, they're going to sell me one. Otherwise, I'm going to go and buy an Audi. They're going to negotiate with you. They're going to sell you whatever it is you need at that point in time. So absolutely, yes, you may be stepping off the SAP journey, but you're definitely not off the SAP journey constantly. You can go back onto that SAP journey at any point in time. Which brings us into the second point, the SAP statement that you will have to pay back maintenance. Again, it's a factual statement. Back maintenance is a contractual obligation in a lot of SAP contracts. So the first thing I'd say is to check your individual contracts. But yes, the option is if you wanted to come and bring your system back into maintenance, you'd have to pay back maintenance. Now, if you're on an ECC system, you're going to come back to SAP. You wouldn't be bringing your ECC system back into maintenance when they can't offer maintenance. So you need to look at that as a customer and look at where you're going to go with this and say, actually, if I'm 3 or 4 years down the line or 5 years down the line, and I'm going to stand up a brand new RISE instance, or I'm going to stand up a new instance of whatever SAP is selling me at the time, am I really going to migrate one system to the other? Or am I going to stand up a complete new system that is built for my business at that point in time? In which case, why do you need to pay back maintenance if you're going to stand up an individual system? It's a new sale to SAP, in which case you can negotiate exactly as you would today with SAP around how you stand up that new system. So yes, back maintenance could be a consideration if you're looking at moving back in 12 months or 18 months time. If you're looking at a journey of 2, 3 plus years, back maintenance really isn't something to be concerned about and something to worry about at this point. That said, if you're looking at going to third-party support for 12 months to then go back to SAP, I'd be honest and say maybe third-party support isn't the right solution for you because of that very reason. The third question here we've got is interoperability. Again, a very common one, and one that was actually raised to me from some of the meetings we had with Gartner. The interoperability of your ERP system with anything outside, with any new purchases or with any third-party applications is something that is absolutely critical to you and your business. But absolutely, that is something which is covered by Spinnaker Support. It's something that is built into all of our contracts, and we'll guarantee the interoperability of your system that is under our support with any of the third-party applications. So it's not something that we see as any potential risk. It's something that SAP and the vendors will talk about as a significant risk of third-party support. But for us, it's a common thing that is put into all of our contracts that we will guarantee that interoperability. Similarly, security and compliance. Another thing that the SAP teams will say is an extreme risk. And yes, security and compliance is a very emotive topic. A lot of our customers, particularly in today's world, have security and compliance right at the top of their agenda. So why would you make a decision that puts your security at risk? You wouldn't. And the 1,500 customers that we've got working with us today have all made this decision. They've all analysed that security and compliance risk and decided that actually there is no risk. There is no risk to moving to third-party support with Spinnaker. So we have a comprehensive security solution. We were moving away from a patch-driven approach, but patches aren't timely. They're released weeks, months, sometimes after an event. They're one size fits all. They're pushed out globally and could potentially cause significant issues with any customizations you've got, which leads to a long time to test, long time to install. So actually, we're moving to a more targeted defense in depth approach that we offer via Spinnaker Support. 98% of our customers will state that their security has been improved. And it's the reason we've got a lot of highly regulated industry customers who are very, very happy working with our security teams and have, as we say, improved their security posture as a result of coming across the third-party support. Fifth comment, how do you handle future requirements? Another one that we quite often get from customers who are negotiating with SAP. I think the first thing that I often say to customers is, but isn't it great that your future requirement doesn't have to be SAP based? You're no longer held back by the ability to retire shelfware if you buy an SAP cloud product or if you buy a new SAP product. The ability to go and buy a product from another vendor that is probably best of breed and can fit what your requirement is, and still then turn around to Spinnaker and say, I'm no longer using these licenses, I want to reduce my support accordingly. That's actually a very powerful thing. So future requirements are opened up and you've got the ability to look at other solutions for your future requirements. But again, if you are buying future cloud products from SAP, as we talked about with interoperability, it's absolutely handled under our support contract. There is a perception that you won't be able to negotiate as strongly with SAP if you're not under support. If you're buying cloud licenses and cloud solutions from SAP, you absolutely will not be impacted in your commercial negotiations by moving to third-party support for your on-premise. And finally, the concept of support being more than break fix is something that SAP will talk a lot to customers about. So they'll talk about the break fix elements of their service and of their costs being roughly 20%, and 80% of their costs being based on the value services that they deliver, their CQCs and things like that, the early watch alerts, so the S4 readiness assessments, things like this. So the question I'll ask the customers there is, how much are you using those services? If you look back at the last 2 or 3 years, how much of those services have you consumed? And if so, how much value have you driven from those services? Have you driven enough value to justify 80% of the cost that you're paying to SAP? Or actually, in reality, is that 80% being spent, as we talked about earlier, on R&D for products that you'll never use? Is it being spent on the latest versions of RISE that you're not going to go to? It's certainly not being reinvested into ECC, and it's certainly not being reinvested into their on-premise support portfolio. So yes, so SAP will offer value-add services, but they only value add if they're consumed and if you're consuming them hugely. So I would encourage you as a customer to look at your usage and say, actually, if I'm not using those, why am I paying 80% of my charges for them? So hopefully by now you all have an understanding of what third-party support is, why it's relevant to you as an SAP customer, what options that could open up for you, and potentially some of the things that SAP might say and some of the considerations you may need to make as you look to your third-party support journey. So if you're still looking at this and thinking, yes, this is something that I could do, the next thing we really need to understand is, how do we do it? So rather than me talk to you about that, I'm going to hand you over to Gavin, who's going to talk you through how we deliver the service. Gavin, over to you.
Broadly speaking, our services can be split into 2 categories. So Oracle and SAP support, software support, and managed services. On the Oracle and SAP support, software support, under this category, we replace the vendor maintenance agreement. So what is often referred to as level 3 or level 4 support, higher level support agreement that you get from the vendor, we take that over. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail shortly. On the managed services side, so this is where our organization takes care of your day-to-day support requirements. So this is really keeping your relevant IT functions going. and this is often referred to as second level support. But what we're talking about today is really SAP software support, so the category on the left-hand side. And as you can see from the diagram, there's 5 services to put them into categories. The first one is break fix. So this is really keeping your system up and running. So if anything in your SAP production environment breaks, we are on the hook to fix that. So big difference to the vendor. SAP will not look after any customizations. At Spinnaker, we don't distinguish between standard SAP code and your customizations or your Z programs or interfaces. If it's in production and it breaks, we're on the hook to fix that. Second category is tax and regulatory compliance. So at Spinnaker, we've got a dedicated department. We cover more than 100 countries around the world, globally. And our tax and regulatory team, what they do in partnership with some leading tax authorities, monitor tax and regulatory changes for all the countries that are relevant for our customers. And we will produce a monthly report letting you know of any possible changes and issues you need to be aware of to keep you compliant. From a delivery perspective, then we'll work with you to deliver those changes and make sure that you are compliant. Third category is general inquiry. So unlike the vendor, we don't run a self-help model. Rather than your team spending valuable time investigating how to do things, what you can do in the future under our support is create a ticket with Spinnaker. Our experienced team of 20 plus years experience will either answer that question directly or research and answer and find those solutions, find those answers for you. Our fourth category is security and vulnerability management. So John has spoken a little bit about this already. We have a defense in depth approach. So rather than relying on a patch on the application level retrospectively, we focus on keeping your entire SAP infrastructure secure. We see this as a better approach. And as John mentioned, we have many customers who've actually chosen us based on our security solutions. And our final category is technology advisory services. So this is similar to your general inquiries. So here we welcome questions related to interoperability, questions such as cloud hosting, anything like that. Create a ticket, and we will work with you for the solutions on those topics. But rather than me talk about it, I'm very happy to have Alan here today, Alan from Findel. Welcome, Alan. Findel's been with us for coming up for 6 years. So thanks for joining us, Alan.
No problem, Gavin.
So what made you decide to join Spinnaker 6 years ago and move to a third-party support model?
Around that time, we had a new CIO come into the business, and we got some challenges around the P&L charges we were getting across the board, and the biggest ticket item we had was SAP support. So bullseye was on that across the business. We reviewed the services that we've been getting, the value we've been getting out of the costs that we were paying, and I think over the space of 5 years, we'd logged about 5 or 7 calls that had passed the vendor support up into SAP support, and the answers back weren't particularly gave us any advantage from what we'd sort of derived ourselves. We have quite a good, strong internal team. It's only five people deep, but we're very knowledgeable. We understand our business well, better than anyone else. And yeah, we quite often knew how we should be building our system ourselves, and it was really edge cases that we were using SAP support. And yeah, it wasn't it didn't add value to our business at that time. We'd upgraded to ECC6, latest EHP at the time 7 recently, so we were in a good position. We were fully patched up, and at that point then we looked at what cost savings we could generate through third-party support.
Okay, and I mean that's sort of fairly common scenario. How have you found Spinnaker Support?
It's very comparable. We've probably logged a few more calls, because what we've found with Spinnaker Support is we've been able to get more into sort of consultative approach. So what we would do is, if we're looking at doing a development in an area and we're not sure which way to tackle it, there's probably been half a dozen instances where we've actually reached out to the support team over there and had a series of discussions with consultants who've gone off and done some investigation for us and made suggestions to us. Again, we've got a strong team internally. Some of those suggestions were what we came up with ourselves, and it sort of reinforced what the direction we were going. And other times it's been it's taken us in a slightly different direction. So yeah, no, it's worked well for us.
So that would be the major difference between maintenance under SAP and Spinnaker is consultancy. That the fact that you can rely on us for providing additional support and advice.
It's more definitely, yeah. It's more than just a break fix. We can sit down. I think one of the good things as well is you don't seem to have a lot of movement within the team as well. People seem to stay with you, and we've sort of formed relationships with those people. We know. Example, basis is probably an area where we're not the strongest internally, but we know if we pick up the phone, we can be speaking to Marcus, who's a brilliant basis guy in your team, Gavin, and yeah, he's provided some great support to us over the years. So yeah.
Okay, so it's actually knowing the engineers by their first names and being an extension of your team. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
All right, and if you think of your original goals 6 years ago, to take this perceived chance of moving to third-party support, the journey, would you say that you've achieved your business goals, and what's been the business impact?
There's not been a negative impact to the business. We probably, our strategy as a business probably has changed from sort of being more ERP focused and everything in the one place. I think a lot of businesses are looking at this hybrid model where you take the best of breed from each element that you require. That has worked for us. I reiterate it again, strong team internally. They've been able to do all the integrations with the new tools that have been brought into the business, and it's worked well for us. Yes, cost saving has allowed us to do investments into other areas. I can't reiterate that enough. The savings has been sizable with this, so that has been redeployed within the business though, and been reinvested into other areas.
Okay, well, thank you, Alan. I'm really glad that you've been happy with the service and you've been able to achieve your business goals, and we hope that we can support you for many years to come. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Gavin. I think the only thing I'd want to kind of add to that endorsement from Alan and the explanation from Gavin wasn't enough. What we also have within the Spinnaker Support offering is what we believe is an absolute industry first, in that we have the ultimate support guarantee, which means that we will guarantee all of the statements we make, all of the interoperability. We will guarantee to improve your security posture. We have such strong belief in our engineers and in our delivery team and Gavin and his team that we will quite happily put a guarantee around this, so that if we cannot meet any of these objectives and we can't deliver on them, then we will work with you and enable you to go back to the vendor. It's something we've never ever had to do in our history, and that's why we're confident to offer it, because we know that we can deliver on the service that we're putting forward. So hopefully by now we've understood third-party support, we've understood the relevance to SAP and how that could potentially help you as a business, and you've heard from Alan and from Gavin about what the service entails and how it can clearly work in real world scenarios. So if you're looking at making this transition, what does a great engagement look like? And this is something that is very, very key. From our perspective, from a Spinnaker support perspective, we can switch on delivery tomorrow. We can be ready to go and deliver the support service in a very, very short time. But that does not mean that's a great engagement for you as a customer, and it doesn't often drive the best transition for you. So what are some of the things that you as a customer need to be doing? First and foremost, and this is very, very relevant to SAP, is to identify the skeptics, but also the stakeholders across your organization. There will be stakeholders within finance, potentially, within supply chain, within HR, within IT. It's not going to be one single stakeholder in the majority of customers. So those stakeholders may have different desires. They may have different views on whether they need to be on the latest version of the software, or on how critical security is to them, or how critical tax and regulatory updates are. So identifying all of those stakeholders early on in the piece and making sure that they're all comfortable on the impact that this is going to have on them and their business, and giving them the time to address their concerns, time to speak with us and speak with other internal stakeholders to understand and put their minds at ease around the change that's going to happen. Further to that, building consensus amongst all of those stakeholders about what is critical. So, for example, customers will potentially look at the fear of missing out on not being on the latest version. But actually, when you dig down into that and you speak with those stakeholders, there is there's a desire to be on the latest version potentially, but when you scratch the surface, there is no need to be on the latest version. And actually, if you then go back to those stakeholders and say, the costs that we're going to save, the monies we're going to save can be reinvested within your area in these other areas which will drive business value, then all of a sudden there's a consensus on actually that is no longer critical. What is critical is being able to deliver the value. And that can be unlocked, slightly to what Alan was saying, that can be unlocked by taking those savings and reinvesting them in other areas that can help the business grow and help with the business strategy. And the one we talked about slightly earlier on in the call is understanding the value that's delivered today by the existing support model. So if you are significant users of all the value services that SAP are offering, and if you're a significant looking significantly like you're going to move to RISE in the next 12 months, and therefore you're going to be using all of the RISE migration services, then perhaps third-party support isn't the right option for you. But take the time to understand the value you're getting today, the value you get from your engagement with SAP today, and therefore your SAP strategy. Understand if your SAP strategy is actually your SAP strategy, or is it SAP's strategy that they've pushed down onto you? Do you really want to move to RISE? Or do you feel like you have to move to RISE? And actually, if you had your choice, you would move in 2035, or you would move on a different time frame to a different platform, be that an on-premise platform or cloud platform. So be clear on that strategy, and why is it the strategy? Is it driven by you and your organization, or is it driven by SAP and their goals? And then if that's still something we're looking at doing, and we're still looking at how we go, the one thing I want to make some time for on the call today is to talk about the road to freedom, as we're going to call it. So as you no doubt are all aware, that the date for SAP is the 30th of September. By the 30th of September, you need to inform SAP that you're likely to terminate. You need to give a formal notice that you're terminating your maintenance with them. So a lot of customers may look at this and think, well, I'll look at it in the start of September. That, again, as we say, we can deliver support very, very quickly. We can switch on very, very quickly. But a successful engagement in this space, given what we've talked about on the previous slide about the stakeholder engagement internally, can typically take anywhere between 5 to 6 to 7 months. So if we look from where we are today, that 5 or 6 months is going to take us into the end of the year. So we're looking at maybe 2 to 3 months to get through those validation and discovery periods where we're assessing the solution, where we're looking at ticket history, we're looking at the current state of your SAP contracts to make sure that there's nothing prohibitive in those contracts that would limit what you could do. We're looking at the scoping, the definition around geographic coverage, exact requirements for tax and regulatory coverage in each geo. We're looking at technical validations, sitting down with your security teams, your CISO, to make sure that the change in approach is completely understood and completely meets any audit requirements you have, whether that PCI DSS or any SOX compliance that you need to adhere to, and making sure your stakeholders are comfortable with that. So all these things can take time. So I guess my ask at that point is, if this is something you're looking at, please start talking to us early, start talking to us now so we can help you through that process. This is something that you guys as customers will probably do once, maybe twice if you moved across customers, but once or twice in your life. This is something we do on a weekly basis. So we can guide you through that process, we can guide you through the conversations with SAP, we can guide you through how we see the most successful transitions and onboard customers happen. So again, make sure you're giving yourself enough time to do what you need to do internally, and make sure you have enough time to make the right decision based on your specific requirements. So that's really all we wanted to cover today, and all we have time to cover on the webinar today. So the key takeaways for me, hopefully that you as an audience are taken from this, is first and foremost, you have options within SAP space. RISE is not the only answer. It's not the answer to every single question. You have options. That's one thing I'd love you all to understand. And if you are looking into any of those options, they are all underpinned and enabled by moving to Spinnaker Support for your SAP support. As Alan touched on very well in his piece, third-party support is a viable option for funding innovation. So for repurposing the spend that you were incurring with the vendor support, repurposing that to fund innovation projects, to fund products that drive business value, even when you're moving to the cloud. The cost savings, we can't leave out. The cost savings have to be there. The initial cost savings on average, they're 50 to 62%. They can go higher depending on your usage, depending on the volumes of shelfware, for example, you might have. But they are the tip of the iceberg. You've also got to then look at the ongoing costs that you are avoiding by removing the need to upgrade or the need to implement enhancement packs and things like that are those costly in terms of currency, but also in terms of manpower and time. So in using third-party support as an enabler to transform, and finally, to act now. As we talked about in the last couple of slides, to act now, to make sure that you're fully prepared, and make sure that you give yourself as an organization the time to fully appreciate what your options are and fully understand the impact of the decision you're going to make across all the stakeholders. So that's all from me. The one thing I'd like to leave you with here is just a quote from a very recent Gartner white paper, which I think sums up very nicely the kind of gist of this presentation, which is customers can use third-party support as a staging post before deciding on the next stage of their ERP, whether that's with RISE or whether that's with an alternative provider. I think that's a very nice way of summing up what we hopefully portrayed across this webinar for you. So with that, I will end the webinar, and thank you all for joining.